So how do we deal with setbacks? I got this question the other day on my Instagram story, went into it a little bit, but I felt like it deserved expansion and was a great topic because obviously a lot of people deal with what they perceive as setbacks. Specifically, the guy who asked was asking about with work, but extrapolate it to any goal or life in general that you're working on. How do I manage the setbacks or the ebbs and the flows? So the answer that comes to mind immediately for me is reframing the language around it. Our brain thinks in the words that we use, so changing the words that we use to describe the situation is literally magic. It's alchemy. We're changing the subject, how we relate to it, and by doing that, you literally change your reality in your head. And this can go into the metaphysical and the woo-woo, but even just practically speaking, like if you want studies, they say that optimists or people who have an optimistic outlook on life have a higher quality of life. So literally just by looking at things in a positive light, you will make them more positive. So I choose to look at things like setbacks and hold myself accountable or catch myself when I feel like I'm in a low season or a point where I've been set back towards a goal that I'm working on. Two questions that I think are very helpful for nurturing this sense or trying to find the positivity in a situation is asking yourself, one, if assuming this is happening for a reason, what could that reason be? Just explore it with curiosity. And then two is kind of an extension of that is like, if I had chosen this to happen to me, what would the reason be for? You know, is this to build character, persistence, resilience? Is it something that's needed to be developed in myself? Is the reason that I'm not getting the consistent client flow in my business so that I take a more conscious look at my lead generation or my offer? Is the reason that we're having a break in this relationship is so that I can have the space to realize I was in a toxic relationship in the first place? I think honestly the mistake in general is presupposing that life and any of its verticals are going to be a linear path, i.e. it just keeps going in a straight line. Intuitively and obviously everyone knows that this is not true. Life naturally ebbs and it flows. It's a lot more like the coming of the tide. And the example I used before explaining this was like, what does it make more sense to do? Surf the waves when they come, or spend time screaming at the ocean for it to change or expecting it to somehow be different, or when you're in the period between the waves, getting upset and trying to surf without a wave? It's a playful analogy, but I think life is often found in the metaphor. Like the metaphors capture potentially more truth than the real experience itself. So the ability to reframe the language that we use around the circumstances that we're going through and exploring with curiosity rather than immediately assigning and labeling like, oh, I'm in a rut, I've fallen off the path, I've had a setback in my job. Again, there could be very mechanical things that you could point to and be like, yeah, well, what else would you call losing a bunch of money in the stock market, or getting broken up in a relationship, or having an injury in preparation for some sort of sporting event? Wouldn't you obviously call that a setback? And while I would agree that it is potentially delaying the time between you and the specific outcome, I would invite you to be curious about it and say, what is this trying to teach me? How is this going to make me more prepared for the result when I get there? Because maybe in your business, if all the money came in right now, you don't have systems in place to manage it properly, to handle it. Maybe you're not the person with the character enough to have that gravity of a bunch of money coming in. Maybe the injury in preparing for sports is actually to show you more about biomechanics, teach you about proper nutrition so that you're more prepared in the end. Or maybe even you've developed an unhealthy attachment to the goal itself, whether it's money, a sporting event, a relationship, whatever you're working towards, and you need space away to learn the lesson that your identity is not in that thing. You've placed too much of yourself in it. So you needed the quote unquote setback. And I choose to think of it as lateral shifts, right? If we think of like a bar graph instead of a straight line going up, it's either oscillating like some sort of sine wave, you know, like a nice wiggly line, or it can even be a step where you're up for a little bit, then horizontal, up for a little bit, horizontal, but you're still making progress, right? Like time is elapsing and who you are becoming through that whole process is the goal anyway, because everyone knows conceptually getting the thing isn't going to make you more happy, getting to X amount of money isn't going to make you more happy, relationship, physique, whatever. So in the moments where you catch yourself feeling down or feeling like you've been set back, remind yourself of that truth, one, that there is really no destination that is going to change your state. And two, explore with curiosity, what is the reason for this happening? Why is this happening to me? What is the lesson that's supposed to come through? And again, just by choosing to look for it and just by choosing the words differently, you are actually going to change the texture and color of that experience for yourself. So this isn't just reality denial, as some might say, or delusion. I would argue that all of reality comes through your perception field. So if you have the cognitive ability, conscious decision to change the lens through which you view reality, it is literally changing your reality. And no one can tell you different. If you are delusional to the point where you actually internally believe that your reality is happening a different way than maybe other people would agree with, then it's true to you. No one can find the guy who's completely content just fishing on the beach all day with no aspiration to build a massive business or get famous or whatever. Nobody can go up to that guy and say that he's wrong, because for him it's true. Just like on the other end of the spectrum, somebody who wants to, really put a dent in the world, build massive businesses, create products that change the world, make content, do whatever it is. You can't tell that person that what they're doing is wrong, because for them and their field of reality that they're creating, they view that as true and as their purpose and as their cause. So don't worry about setbacks, because what are you even being set back from? It's some arbitrary, assumed either pace that you're moving towards a goal or result that you quote unquote should or should not have. Based on what? Based on either your internal metrics and guidelines and KPIs and whatever else that you set for yourself, or worse, someone else's expectation. And you're saying, so-and-so got to X amount of MRR in their business, so-and-so got this many followers in after a year, so-and-so lost this much weight in this window of time, so-and-so got married at X age, I'm late, I'm behind. All of this urgency, all of this unease about setback, to me, like red flags are going up around the language. And I think curating this sense where you're very disciplined about the words that you use to describe your reality is a muscle. And as you get better and better at it, you'll find yourself making all these should statements and assigning right and wrong all the time. I'm not pushing total relativism on you, and that's a discussion for another video and maybe a full-on podcast in its own. But just for yourself to ground it in the question, like, how do we deal with setbacks? First, audit the language you use around it. Don't necessarily label it as a setback, but you can label it as a lateral move, a pause, a rest, the undulating of the tide. And even if you do want to call it a setback, I would throw in a phrase that might be helpful. The bigger the setback, the bigger the comeback. So just explore with curiosity, what is this moment trying to teach me, and why is this happening for me rather than to me? Shift away from the victim and towards the person in the driver's seat, because you are creating reality, not the other way around. Hope this was helpful. Comment below what else you want me to talk about or expound on further. Message me on socials if you have any questions. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see you tomorrow.